It gives me great pleasure to be here today. And I'm going to talk to you ladies about something which most Americans know absolutely nothing about. World War II, the evacuation of children. And I have this PowerPoint presentation that will help me remember, because I thought that, first of all, since most Americans don't know much about what precipitated this, I'd spend a couple of minutes letting you know. As you probably know, World War I was between Germany and her friends and America, who came into the war in 1917, England, France, Russia, Japan, and Italy. Believe it or not, Japan and Italy were on the side of America and Britain in World War I. Germany lost the war, and as a result, they had to pay what's called reparations. In other words, they had to pay the winning powers for losing. And they also lost quite a bit of territory. They lost some land that went to Lithuania up here. They lost land that went to Poland, this pink area. This land here was called the Rhineland, was demilitarized, and some of it went back to France. Well, the Germans didn't like this, obviously, and because of the reparations they had to pay, there was a great deal of inflation, and there was a lot of domestic trouble and violence. The communists tried to take over, and the fascists tried to take over, the Nazis. And they were having wars. Hitler took power by killing all of his opponents. They just murdered them left and right. And in the early 1930s, Hitler took power. Hitler murdered his opponents, and he became the Chancellor of Germany. This is the Reichstag, the German parliament, and they're all saluting him. He was aided and abetted in this by Mussolini, who was the dictator of Italy. In 1937, Neville Chamberlain, who was the Prime Minister of England, tried to avert war. He went to Munich in Germany, made an agreement with Hitler there would be no war. This is a famous photograph. He's waving the document that says, and he's saying, "Peace in our time." Well, obviously there wasn't peace in our time. So then the Nazis wanted to expand, and they did. First of all, they moved their soldiers into the Rhineland. Now, if France or Britain had done anything about it, they would have backed off, but they didn't. They didn't want to start another war. Then they moved into Austria, and they declared it a greater German zone. Then they took over Czechoslovakia, and Britain and France still didn't do anything about it. Of course, America was totally disinterested at this point. And then, since the Germans saw nothing was happening, they decided to march into Poland. And on September the 1st, 1939, without any declaration of war or any warning, the Nazis invaded Poland. Now, the British government knew that war was coming, and they had made plans to evacuate the children and some of the older people from the big cities. The reason was this: in the 1930s, during the war in Spain, the Civil War in Spain, a lot of the cities were bombed, a lot of people were killed. So they made plans to evacuate the vulnerable. The Nazis marched into Poland. On that day, my brother Norman and I assembled at my school. Now, I was 5 years old, and I had no idea what was going on. The parents were told, your children are being sent away, but it was secret. They didn't know where we were going. They didn't know where we were going to be staying. They didn't know how long we were going to be gone. They didn't know when they were going to see us again. Now this is not, these pictures I got from the internet, this is not me, but it was, this is a scene repeated many, many times on that day. The Prime Minister said to Hitler, move your troops out of Poland. By September the 3rd, war will be declared. This was a little bit before, this was maybe a year before we went away. Believe it or not, that's me in a sailor suit knitted by my aunt and Norman. Norman was 8 years older than me at the time. He didn't belong to the same school, he didn't go to the same school I went to, but my mother wouldn't let me, as a 5-year-old, go off on my own. So, we were then marched to the railway station, which was near us, Liverpool Street Station. I'm pointing out here, we all had luggage labels on, like we were like packages with our name, address. We all carried little suitcases with, I guess, a change of clothes. In those 2 days, 1.5 million children left home to parts unknown. Imagine that, sending you. Now, as Linda mentioned, I have a chat group of people, and one of my friends in Australia told me she was 18 months old when she was evacuated. Her mother gave her to an unknown woman at the railway station, and the woman took her. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't hear. Her mother didn't hear from her about her for a week. She didn't know where she was. Liverpool Street Station was maybe half a mile from our school. This picture is actually taken in the 1920s, but this was the station where we left from. We went on the choo-choo train. This picture shows soldiers going to battle there and kids being evacuated here. We were all issued with gas masks. During World War I, the Germans dropped gas bombs in England, and I'm sure we did the same to them. In fact, my mother was injured by gas, and when she got married to my father in 1917, she was wrapped up in bandages because she'd been in an air raid gas attack. So they thought this would happen again, and we were all issued with gas masks. This type of gas mask was for a baby, like Mickey Mouse was supposed to be, not so scary. They were scary, and it's hard to breathe in a gas mask. It shows kids look like these gas masks. Well, we went on a train. I'd never been on a train before. Of course, they were all steam trains. You have to be careful when you ride. Anybody ever ridden a steam train? I'm sure. Well, you got to be careful when you stick your head out the window because the smoke gets, you get the cinders in your eyes. So this was my first time on a train. It was me, my brother, the entire school, and all the teachers. We didn't know where we were going. Oops, went too fast. We wound up in Newmarket, which was maybe 100 miles to the northeast of London. Newmarket is a very well-known town in England as one of the premier racetracks. Newmarket had been racing in Newmarket since the time of King James. You remember King James? Of course you remember King James. Yes. You remember. We call him Jimmy the One. Well, you do know about King James because you remember the King James Bible? This is the guy that ordered the translation of the King James Bible. You also heard of Jamestown? Guess who it was named after? Well, we marched down the street, all of us, hand in hand, in what in England is called a crocodile. 2 kids, and I was walking with Norm. And I still remember this, I was 5 years old. We were told, okay, you and you here, and you and you here, and you and you here.